Some villages on Earth defy belief, clinging to sheer cliffs, shrouded in mist, or hidden behind ridges that roads rarely dare to cross. For centuries, these communities have chosen isolation to protect traditions and ways of life far older than the highways around them. Reaching these villages is a true challenge. Cut off by rugged terrain, harsh climates, and endless slopes that test every step. Yet if you're determined enough to cross those barriers, you'll find communities that time itself seems to have forgotten. Join us as we explore 30 mysterious villages no one believes exist, quiet corners of the world where life endures beyond what maps can show. Ittoqqortoormiit. Perched on a rocky shore where icy fjords meet the North Atlantic, a cluster of colorful houses clings to the cliffs under low, pale sunlight. The settlement lies nearly 600 miles from Greenland's capital, completely isolated, with glaciers and fjords stretching for dozens of miles in every direction. Founded in the 18th century, it became a key hub for Arctic hunters and whalers navigating these frigid waters. Wooden houses, painted in bright red and yellow, stand in stark contrast to the grey ice and snow, preserving the traditions of generations. Reaching Ittoqqortoormiit demands longboat journeys or small aircraft flights, often hindered by unpredictable ice and fierce winds, testing even experienced travelers. Dog sleds and snowmobiles remain essential for moving across frozen landscapes during the long winter months. It feels suspended between sea and ice, untouched by modern towns, inviting explorers to imagine life at the edge of the Arctic world. Santorini. Rising abruptly from the deep blue Aegean Sea, whitewashed houses cling to steep volcanic cliffs under the warm Mediterranean sun. The island of Santorini, Greece, lies nearly 300 miles southeast of Athens, completely isolated and reachable only by boat, with caldera cliffs plunging almost 900 feet into the sea below. Built after a massive eruption centuries ago, it preserves Cycladic architecture with blue-domed churches and narrow, winding alleys. From above, rooftops and terraces form a striking mosaic of white and cobalt, contrasted by the shimmering turquoise water and scattered volcanic rocks. It feels suspended between sky and sea, untouched by modern towns, where vibrant sunsets invite visitors to imagine life atop cliffs shaped by fire and ocean. TICHIT. Rising like a fortress from endless sands, a cluster of clay dwellings spreads across the flat desert under the relentless sun, appearing almost frozen in time. Perched nearly 1,000 feet above the Sahara, the village lies completely isolated, with vast plains stretching nearly 50 miles in every direction before reaching the next settlement. Built over 1,000 years ago, it served as a vital trading post along ancient caravan routes that traversed this harsh, barren landscape. Its walls and narrow alleys, made entirely of adobe, show a carefully planned layout for defense, preserving the original geometry of long-forgotten architects. Reaching TICHIT requires crossing scorching sands by day and freezing nights by foot or camel, testing even the most determined travelers for centuries. Camels remain the primary means of transport, navigating shifting dunes where no modern roads exist. From above, the rooftops form a maze-like pattern, blending seamlessly with ochre sands and sparse shrubs, revealing the hidden complexity of the village. It feels suspended between time and desert, untouched by modern towns, stretching across the horizon in endless ochre and brown, inviting explorers to imagine life in a world entirely cut off from civilization. HENNINGSVAER. Scattered across a chain of rocky islets in the Lofoten archipelago, HENNINGSVAER appears almost afloat, a fishing village balanced between sea and sky. Its narrow roads cling to the edges of stone, linking the small islands with bridges that stretch delicately over deep, frigid waters. For centuries, fishermen have come here to face the wild Norwegian Sea, where sudden storms can rise without warning and ice forms on every hull. In winter, the mountains around the harbor glow beneath the northern lights, casting shifting colors across the snow-covered rooftops. Before modern bridges were built in the late 20th century, access depended entirely on boats that fought through freezing winds and waves. The harbor remains the village's heart, lined with red-painted warehouses standing on wooden stilts above the tide. From above, HENNINGSVAER looks unreal, a thin ribbon of land surrounded by blue and white, suspended in the Arctic silence. It endures as one of Norway's most isolated communities, where life still follows the rhythm of sea, weather, and light. KOTOR. Nestled at the head of a deep fjord-like bay, KOTOR rests between steep mountains and the shimmering waters of the Adriatic, appearing almost suspended in time. The medieval town is surrounded by fortified walls that climb over 1,000 feet, enclosing narrow streets and terracotta-roofed buildings from centuries past. Access is limited. Winding mountain roads or the sea offer the only approach, where sharp bends and sudden cliffs test every traveler. For centuries, KOTOR thrived as a Venetian trading post, its harbor filled with wooden ships and markets alive with spices, salt, and silks. The streets echo with history, while stone squares open onto hidden churches, squares, and small piazzas that reveal the town's rich architectural tapestry. From the mountains above, KOTOR appears as a patchwork of red roofs, grey stone, and turquoise water, cradled by jagged peaks and winding fjord. The bay's calm surface mirrors the surrounding cliffs, yet storms can rise quickly, reminding visitors of the town's fragile edge between land and sea. It endures as one of Europe's most secluded and enchanting towns, where life still moves in rhythm with history, harbor, and mountains. METEORA. Rising like colossal pillars from the plains of Thessaly, towering rock formations stretch toward the sky, their surfaces sculpted by wind and centuries of erosion. The site of METEORA, Greece, lies in central Greece, about 200 miles northwest of Athens, standing completely isolated above the valley floor. Perched atop these vertical cliffs are ancient monasteries built by monks seeking solitude and protection from the world below. Each structure clings to stone like a nest on a cliff, reachable only by narrow paths or steep stairways carved directly into the rock. The entire landscape seems to hover between earth and heaven, a silent refuge untouched by time. Few places on Earth capture isolation so vividly, suspended high above the world, where faith and stone have become one.
JAMBIANI village.
Perched along the eastern coast of Zanzibar, JAMBIANI stretches in a thin line between white sandy beaches and the turquoise Indian Ocean, appearing almost frozen in time. The village remains largely isolated, with narrow paths weaving between traditional coral stone houses and vibrant fishing huts scattered along the shore. Access is limited. Small boats or long walks across tidal flats are often the only ways to reach the village, especially during high tide. For generations, local fishermen have maintained centuries-old traditions, casting nets by hand while the community tends coconut palms and small gardens behind the houses. Children play along the shoreline, collecting shells and observing the tide pools where starfish and crabs emerge at low water. The wind carries salt and seaweed, bending palm fronds and brushing through narrow lanes that cling to the coast. From above, JAMBIANI appears suspended between sand and sea, a green and sandy patch punctuated by colorful rooftops, isolated from modern settlements. It endures as one of Zanzibar's most secluded communities, where life flows in quiet rhythm with tides, ocean currents, and centuries of tradition.
Civita di Bagnoregio.
Rising above a valley of deep ravines and rolling clay hills, a fragile medieval town appears to float upon a crumbling ridge of volcanic tuff. The village of Civita di Bagnoregio, Italy, lies in the region of Lazio, about 70 miles north of Rome, completely isolated by the erosion that has eaten away its surrounding cliffs. For centuries, landslides and earthquakes have carved the terrain below, leaving the town stranded on a narrow plateau that narrows with each passing year. The only way to reach it today is by crossing a long pedestrian bridge suspended high above the valley floor. Within its ancient gates, stone houses, quiet squares, and small chapels remain nearly untouched since the Middle Ages. From above, the entire settlement seems to hover like an island of time, surrounded by a sea of mist and ochre ridges. Its walls glow golden at sunset, revealing every crack and contour shaped by wind and centuries of decay. Few places embody fragility and endurance so clearly. A town both vanishing and eternal, standing alone above the silent earth. Phong Nha Kabang. Tucked deep within central Vietnam, a small village clings to the base of towering limestone peaks, isolated from main roads and modern settlements. Surrounded by jagged karst mountains reaching over 2,000 feet, the community is threaded by narrow rivers and dense jungle, forming natural barriers on all sides. Access is limited. During the rainy season, swollen streams and slippery trails make reaching the village by foot or boat a serious challenge. Residents maintain traditional stilt houses and terraced rice fields, preserving centuries-old ways of life in harmony with the rugged landscape. Mist rises from hidden grottos and winding streams, while monkeys and birds add motion and color to the quiet surroundings. From above, the village appears suspended between green peaks and flowing waters, a secluded world almost untouched by time.
The Natsa. Tucked between steep cliffs and the restless waters of the Ligurian Sea, this small settlement seems to hang delicately between mountain and tide. From afar, its pastel houses appear to cling to the stone itself, rising layer upon layer on terraces carved by centuries of human persistence. The village of Vernazza, Italy, remains accessible only by narrow coastal paths or by boat, routes once used by fishermen who braved the unpredictable waves.
Its medieval walls and watchtowers still stand as silent guardians, reminders of an age when isolation was both defense and destiny. The alleys are so tight that two people can barely pass, winding upward through arches and stairways that seem carved into the cliffs themselves. Below, the sea beats endlessly against the rocks, echoing through the harbor like a heartbeat buried beneath the stone. At dusk, every window flickers with light, turning the village into a suspended constellation above the darkening water. Few places in Europe remain this secluded, a living fragment of the past, preserved by its very inaccessibility. Gamcheon. Stacked along the steep hillsides above the southern coast, a maze of pastel houses cascades toward the sea, forming a landscape that seems to shift with the light. The village was built by displaced families after the Korean War, each home carefully added to the slope without a single plan or blueprint. Even today, Gamcheon, South Korea remains hard to reach, with endless stairways winding through narrow passages that climb between stacked rooftops. Walls are painted in soft blues, greens and yellows, their faded tones blending with the ocean breeze and the quiet sound of footsteps below. From above, the rooftops create a mosaic of color and geometry, spreading across the hillside like a living map of resilience. Few vehicles can enter, the paths twist too sharply, leaving only steps and corridors that connect homes clinging to the ridge. At sunrise, the whole slope glows with muted light, revealing the village's fragile balance between mountain and sea. It endures as one of the most secluded urban settlements, a place where daily life unfolds quietly, suspended between gravity and time. Undradal. Nestled on the steep shores of the Arlands Fjord, Undradal clings to the mountainside, a tiny village dwarfed by the towering peaks around it. The settlement is reached by a narrow fjord road that winds through sharp bends, hugging cliffs rising over 1,000 feet above the water. For centuries, the fjord itself was the primary highway, where small boats carried people and goods through waters that shift with sudden winds and tides. The village is famous for its traditional goat cheese, produced in simple wooden houses that have stood for generations. During winter, snow-laden peaks descend almost to the water's edge, while the fjord mirrors the grey sky in perfect stillness. Before the road was completed in the 20th century, access was perilous, relying entirely on rowing or sailing along the fjord. From above, Undredal looks suspended between mountain and fjord, a green and brown patch clinging to the mirrored waters below. It remains one of Norway's most secluded villages, preserving a quiet life dictated by steep slopes, icy waters, and enduring traditions. Albarracin. Rising from the rugged hills of eastern Spain, Albarracin looks like a fortress carved from stone, its rose-colored walls glowing softly in the afternoon light. The town stands high above the Guadalaviar River, encircled by steep cliffs and narrow valleys that once served as natural defenses. Reaching it is no simple task. Winding mountain roads twist for miles through the Teruel region before revealing its ancient towers. Founded during the Moorish period, Albarracin became a stronghold of stone and silence, its walls preserving centuries of history. Wooden balconies lean over cobbled lanes, nearly touching above alleys that follow the contour of the cliffs. Arches, towers, and small squares blend seamlessly into the red sandstone that defines the town's warm, timeless tone. From above, it unfolds like a spiral fortress enclosed by mountains, echoing with the stillness of forgotten ages. It remains one of Spain's most inaccessible and perfectly preserved towns, a citadel suspended between earth, rock, and memory. Shirakawa Village. Tucked into a narrow valley among steep forested mountains, this village rises along the river, its steep, thatched gasho-zukuri homes blending naturally with the terrain. Shirakawa Village, Japan, remains isolated, reachable only by winding mountain roads that climb sharply through dense woods, often blocked by heavy winter snow. Each gasho-zukuri home is uniquely designed with steep, triangular thatched roofs, crafted to withstand deep snow and shed ice quickly under harsh alpine conditions. Narrow lanes twist between clusters of houses, preserving the compact village layout that has survived centuries of isolation and relentless weather. The settlement maintains its traditional rhythm, with small farm plots and homes adapted to seasonal extremes, ensuring survival through long, snowy winters. From the surrounding heights, rooftops form a geometric pattern of brown and gray, contrasting with the forests and the stark white snow of winter. Visitors must traverse steep, uneven paths to explore the village fully, experiencing firsthand the challenges imposed by both terrain and severe weather. It endures as one of Japan's most secluded mountain villages, a living example of architectural ingenuity and resilience against isolation and winter's harshness. Taiwan. Perched on the steep hillsides of northern Taiwan, this cluster of narrow streets and tea houses seems to cling precariously to the mountain, overlooking the restless Pacific below. Jiayufen, Taiwan, remains a secluded village, once a gold mining hub, accessible only by winding mountain roads that twist sharply through dense forest and rocky slopes. Terraced buildings of faded ochre and deep red rise layer upon layer, their wooden balconies and lanterns spilling color into the narrow lanes below. Fog often drifts from the ocean, filling alleys and stairways with a soft, shifting veil that blurs the boundary between land and sky. The streets are labyrinthine, staircases and passageways connecting tea houses, small shops, and residences in a pattern that seems improvised yet enduring.
Visitors ascend slowly, following paths that once guided miners, pausing to trace views of the cliffs and the shimmering bay beyond. From above, the village appears suspended in time, a delicate mosaic of rooftops and terraces perched between mountain and sea. It remains one of Taiwan's most inaccessible and atmospheric settlements, a hidden enclave where history, terrain, and isolation shape every corner of life.
Gimmelwald. Tucked on a steep alpine slope, this tiny village overlooks a deep valley where wildflowers spill down the mountainside toward a glacial stream. Gimmelwald, Switzerland, is reachable only by narrow trails or a small cable car, its remote location shielding it from road traffic and modern development. Stone chalets with wooden balconies cling to the hillside, their rooftops aligned with terraces where goats graze quietly. The surrounding peaks rise nearly 5,000 feet, forming a natural barrier that traps clouds and mists over the valley. Walking through the village, one senses a rhythm unchanged for centuries, where paths wind steeply and each turn reveals a new vista of snow-dusted ridges. It remains one of Europe's most secluded alpine settlements, a living example of mountain life preserved by isolation and elevation.
METEORA. Nestled between gentle hills of the Alsace wine region, this small village stretches along cobblestone streets lined with half-timbered houses painted in warm ochre and pastel tones. Ittoqqortoormiit, France remains remarkably secluded, once a fortified town, accessible primarily by narrow rural roads that wind through vineyards and rolling countryside. Steep gabled roofs and wooden shutters give each building a distinct character, while flowers spill from window boxes, softening the stone facades. Ancient watchtowers and remnants of defensive walls still mark the village perimeter, hinting at its strategic importance centuries ago. The main street twists gently upward, guiding visitors past tiny shops, wine cellars, and cafes that preserve traditional Alsatian charm.
Vineyards surround the settlement on all sides, their green terraces contrasting with the village's muted colors, stretching toward distant forested hills. From elevated paths, the rooftops form a harmonious mosaic, a quiet scene framed by the gentle curves of the valley below. It endures as one of Europe's most preserved medieval villages, a hidden gem where history, architecture, and landscape remain remarkably intact.
Sighișoara. Perched atop a gentle hill in central Romania, this medieval town spreads along cobblestone streets, lined with colorful fortified houses and narrow alleyways.
Sighișoara, Romania, remains partially secluded, reachable only by winding roads that climb from the surrounding plains, preserving the town's historic character. Ancient watchtowers and fortified walls still encircle the settlement, a lasting reminder of its strategic role in medieval trade and defense. The town's pastel houses, with steep tiled roofs and wooden balconies, create a patchwork that follows the slope of the hill. Narrow staircases and alleys connect squares, churches, and guild houses, forming a labyrinthine layout that has endured for centuries. From above, the rooftops form a colorful mosaic framed by green hills stretching toward distant horizons. It endures as one of Europe's most preserved medieval towns, a hidden enclave where history, architecture, and isolation continue to shape life.
Cabo Polonio. Perched on a remote stretch of the Atlantic coast,
Cabo Polonio is a tiny village isolated by shifting sand dunes and relentless ocean tides. There are no roads leading directly to it. Access is possible only by rugged off-road vehicles or long walks across the ever-moving dunes. Traditional wooden houses cling to the sandy landscape, weathered by wind and salt, appearing almost frozen in time. The surrounding beaches stretch for miles under an expansive, ever-changing sky, with waves crashing against the distant cliffs. It remains one of Uruguay's most secluded settlements, a place where isolation shapes life and nature dominates every moment.
Casa de Lua. Perched on the far western edge of the Faroe Islands, a small cluster of houses rests on a narrow plateau that faces the endless North Atlantic. The remote village of Casa de Lua is encircled by vertical cliffs rising more than 2,000 feet, their sheer walls isolating it from the rest of Vega Island. Reaching this place by sea is possible but perilous, as violent currents and crashing waves guard the coast like a living wall of water and wind. Fog rolls in from the Atlantic without warning, swallowing the land until the horizon dissolves into a single shifting veil of gray. It remains one of Europe's most unreachable places, a quiet outpost of human resilience standing against wind, rock, and time. Thief. Hidden deep within the Albanian Alps,
A small valley stretches between towering limestone peaks, where stone houses cluster along the river that winds through the settlement. Theth, Albania, remains one of the most remote villages in the Balkans, reachable only by a narrow, twisting mountain road that tests both driver and vehicle. The village sits nearly 3,000 feet above sea level, enclosed by cliffs and dense forests that rise sharply on every side, isolating it completely. Homes are built from local grey stone and timber, their steeply pitched roofs and simple design blending seamlessly into the rugged landscape. For centuries, Theth has preserved its ancient customs and narrow lanes, a quiet rhythm of life that feels suspended far from modern towns. Travelers must climb or drive slowly along rough trails that wind along steep slopes, tracing routes once used by shepherds and merchants. From the surrounding heights, the village appears as a delicate green corridor threading through jagged peaks, a fragile connection between earth and sky.
It endures today as one of Europe's most secluded mountain settlements, a hidden enclave where isolation continues to define every aspect of daily life. Dartlow. Perched on a steep slope in Georgia's remote Tushetti region, this small village clings to rocky terraces above a winding mountain river. Dartlow, Georgia, remains isolated, accessible only by rugged mountain tracks that test travelers' endurance and skill, especially during seasonal rains. Stone towers and traditional homes with wooden balconies rise from narrow lanes, their architecture shaped by centuries of defense and local craftsmanship. The village layout follows the natural contours of the mountainside, creating a compact settlement that merges seamlessly with the surrounding cliffs. Terraced fields and small plots stretch along the slopes, preserving a way of life adapted to the harsh, high-altitude environment. From above, Dartlow appears as a green and gray patch clinging to the mountains, framed by jagged peaks and deep valleys. It endures as one of Georgia's most secluded mountain villages, a hidden enclave where isolation, architecture, and resilience define every aspect of life. Villa de Leyva. Nestled in a high valley of the Colombian Andes, this colonial town spreads around one of the largest cobblestone squares in South America. Villa de Leyva, Colombia, remains partly secluded, reachable by winding mountain roads that climb through arid hills and scattered farmland. Whitewashed houses with clay-tiled roofs and wooden balconies line narrow streets, preserving the town's 16th-century charm. Surrounding hills and distant mountains frame the settlement, emphasizing its elevated position and the vast plains beyond. It endures as one of Colombia's most preserved colonial towns, a quiet enclave where history and architecture remain largely untouched by modern life. KOTOR. Perched along a remote fjord in southern Chile, this village spreads across wooden walkways that connect stilted houses over marshy terrain.
KOTOR, Chile, remains isolated, accessible only by narrow trails or by boat through the fjord, with no conventional roads linking it to nearby settlements. Houses are built on stilts, with wooden planks forming elevated pathways, blending functionality with the rugged riverside landscape. Dense forests and steep hills rise immediately behind the village, emphasizing its secluded position and challenging access. It endures as one of Chile's most unique and remote settlements, where isolation, ingenuity, and adaptation to the environment define daily life.
Rijal Alma. Tucked into the rugged Asia Mountains, this village clings to steep slopes, its multi-story stone houses forming a compact settlement. Rijal Alma, Saudi Arabia, remains remote, accessible only by narrow mountain roads that wind through rocky terrain and sparse vegetation. Traditional homes, built from local stone and clay, rise in stepped terraces, reflecting centuries of local craftsmanship and adaptation to the steep hillside. It endures as one of Saudi Arabia's most secluded mountain villages, where architecture and isolation preserve a unique historical way of life.